They say time is of the essence, but time is running out. Jaron boots Ennis. The purse bid, the date is set. So he got to get this show on the road or else. In this video, I'm going to break down some of the options and give you guys my perspective on what's going on. So first, we must start with Ring Magazine. Ring Magazine has a brand new article I will link in the description. And as I stated, time is of the essence. News: Jaron boots Ennis versus Karen Chukhadzin Part 2. Part 2. The purse bid hearing is scheduled for September 3rd. And we will find out what this means in this particular article from Jake Donovan. Again, link in the description. Says Jaron boots Ennis now has a hard deadline to avoid an undesirable mandatory title defense. Ring has confirmed that the IBF has scheduled a September 3rd purse bid hearing for Jaron Ennis. It has ordered him to face Karen Chukhadzin. The development comes as unbeaten Philadelphia native is negotiating a unification with Brian Norman Jr. Whatever progress has been made between the pair of undefeated title holders will have to escalate prior to the purse bid. Now, one thing is, I believe the purse bid was supposed to be August 30th initially. And I don't know behind the scenes because they're negotiating with Brian Norman. Possibly they put in for an extension, say, hey, we're trying to get, because the unification could trump the mandatory because that's the unifying of two belts. But it was supposed to be August 30th, but pay attention. A delay can be requested, but it would have to be agreed by both sides. And again, why would, Karen do that? He's not trying to fight Brian Norman. I mean, and that would require step aside money or something to appease him likely, but I don't want to get too far off in that. The fight was ordered July 31st. Lack of discussion between the title holder, second time challenger suggests little to no talks have taken place for this matchup. Chukhadzin is with Germany in a German-based outfit, P2M, that's his promoter. Should the bout move forward, it would come as a rematch to Ennis's 12-round shutout over Chukhadzin January 2023 in Washington, D.C. Remember, it was on Tank Davis's undercard. Ennis won by scores of 120 to 108, which I've already told you guys about, to claim the interim IBF title. It was the first time going the distance in 6 years and the lone career defeat of Karen. Ennis then defended the belt, yada, yada, yada. Crawford was ordered to face Ennis, which you guys know. Crawford moved up to 154, so we can skip over that. Jaron Ennis has subsequently been named the full IBF champion. If you follow my channel, you would know these things. This is why I urge you guys to subscribe for the latest and greatest in boxing. I give it to you, no diddy, daily. So there should be no confusion as far as like, oh, what's happening in boxing and things like that. I'm letting you know. The article says, meanwhile, Chukhadzin made his way back to the #1 slot. Somehow, some way with the IBF, the 28-year-old contender from Kiev, Ukraine, earned a clear-cut victory over Harry Scarf on May. Matchroom has a tentative date set for November 9th for Jaron Ennis' next DAZN headliner, right? You see that. A second fight with Karen Chukhadzin is a hard sell. Notice Ego has been telling you this. A unification with Norman, however, has invigorated social media timelines. The first rounds of talks began earlier. Norman has enough leverage to where Matchroom might have to make a devil's deal. However, the unbeaten WBO is not without an option if the fight doesn't happen. If the Jaron Ennis fight doesn't happen, that payday wouldn't necessarily be the same, but they're going to put him on a top rank card if this fight falls apart with Keyshawn Davis in Norfolk, Virginia. So they're going to give Keyshawn a hometown fight and slap Brian Norman on the card if this fight doesn't happen. It would mark the worst case scenario from all this, but it would still put Ennis and Brian Norman on the same timeline. Their fights would land one night apart, which could be used to further build momentum towards a desirable unification. That said, most in the industry are rooting for a drastic turn of events between now and the purse bid date, which is September 3rd. So let me talk about it. September 3rd is the date. I don't expect Karen Chukadze to want to wait. He lost to Jaron Ennis. He probably feels that because he didn't get embarrassed. It went the distance. Not like he got knocked out by Boots. It was kind of a lackluster showing, all things considered, from Boots, comparatively speaking to his normal performances. So Karen's been the mandatory since July. He worked his way back up the ladder. It's not a good fight for the fans, especially since Boots already beat him. The first fight was boring for the most part, and it just didn't live up to any expectations. So styles make fights. Certain styles, that's what you're going to get. I don't expect that a rematch would be any different in terms of the tempo of the fight. Like, I mean, name a fight in boxing history that you could think of where the first fight was a bad fight and stale to watch, but then they rematched a year later and then it was a barn burner and fight of the year. Again, if you guys can name it, let me know in the comment section. But most of the time, the rematches don't work. Like, you get Arturo Gatti, Mickey Ward, they got a trilogy and all the fights were good, you know, or Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales. The first and the second are good, and that ended up being a trilogy as well. So I can't offhand think of a fight where it was so like boring and uneventful, and then within a year they rematched for whatever circumstance, and then the second fight was way better, right? Like, you look at George Groves versus Carl Froch. The first fight had a lot of drama and action, and then it had climactic ending and action and drama in the second fight, not the other way around. Imagine Carl Froch and George Groves was like Boots versus Karen, and then the second fight's this banger. Again, if you guys could think of many fights, I'm not saying there's no fights out there that have played out like that. Offhand, I just can't think of one. So what does this mean for Boots? I mean, to me, it's what I've always said. Eddie Hearn felt he needed, you know, American star, so he jumped at the opportunity. Rest in peace, Cameron Duncan passed away. Boots became a free agent, so he threw money at it, you know, and that's the play they made. But the day the deal was announced, your boy Ego said, I have my reservations about it because I already seen the play. Welterweight division has grown stale, where a lot of the top names that people have maybe even wanted to see Boots fight over the years have moved on and moved up. Terrence Crawford, he's at 54. Boots is saying he wants to stay at 47 and unify. So Crawford also is not showing much interest in even fighting Boots because he feels he's beyond it in his career. So between the weight and Crawford not expressing much interest, nor Turkey Al-Sheikh, he said that's a good fight, but that's not a top fight for us. So I don't look for that fight to happen, which is a shame because they're with the same people. So Crawford, he moved on. Errol Spence, he's at 54. Virgil Ortiz, he just fought and he's at 54. He had a classic with Sergey Boachuk. So a lot of the names have moved on. And then you got a name like Conor Benn, who was referenced to possibly fight Jaron Ennis in the past. And then he kind of fell off ever since he tested positive in the Chris Eubank Jr. fight. So it's like, what can Eddie Hearn provide? And now with being on a timetable, Karen's waiting. It's like, what are you going to do? You're, and a lot of you guys were saying like, oh, Eddie's the best promoter and Turkey's saving boxing, but peep the play. What fights are you getting that you love? Even Jaron Boots Ennis versus Brian Norman is a good fight for hardcores, but it's not no big fight like Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. So it's a unification. I never had no problem with unifications. I'm just saying when you put it in perspective, it's not like this mega fight that's gonna do crazy numbers or that they probably would even put on pay-per-view. I'd be shocked if they put it on pay-per-view because Norman, he just got elevated. Boots, You know, people are saying he's the email champ because Crawford didn't fight him, so he didn't get the fight for the belt. And then you got basically two young, scrappy, strong welterweights, but both of them are, in the minds of fans, kind of unproven because of different reasons, but they didn't get to fight, you know, for the belt. Because yes, Brian Norman, he did fight Giovanni Santillan for the interim belt, but when Crawford moved up, it created that vacancy and they elevated him. So he didn't fight. It's not like Brian Norman, I know he sparred Crawford, but he didn't fight Crawford and snatch the belt off him. You dig? So it's still not, even if they get it done, it's not a huge fight. And then now you're on this time crunch with the purse bid, which is what I predicted. So ultimately, we'll see what's decided. For me, I always thought that the Karen and Boots fight will make sense. Like, not make sense, but will be what happened. A lot of people are getting sold on Brian Norman and stuff like that. And my thing is, you're going to have to pay him. He's a brand new champion. He's young. It's a risk for both fighters. He would have to leave ESPN to fight on your network. And it's funny because you guys said Turkey has unlimited money. And when I talked about Crawford Madrimov losing over $10 million per the reports, people said, oh, money is money. Or when I talk about UFC Riyadh season losing $20 million plus already, you guys say, oh, Turkey has unlimited funds. They don't really care about that. So something's not adding up. If that is in fact true, then why is it so hard to get Brian Norman and Jaron Ennis done if you have unlimited funds and you can just bankroll it and you don't care about $10 million, $20 million losses? That's not making sense. That's not making sense at all. So we'll see what happens, but we know what it would take to get a fight like this done. Person taking a risk, going to different networks and fighting and unifying, they're going to want to be compensated because you're potentially taking them off the trajectory that Top Rank has them for. And again, the fight's really not marinated outside of hardcore boxing fans. So you got to pay like you weigh to get it done. We'll see if Eddie Hearn can get it done, or will it be Jaron Ennis versus Karen, or maybe they pay step aside money and then have Jaron Ennis fight Blair the Flair. But there's a lot of content creators who are just blabbermouthing, rushing out videos, getting people hyped or trying to get people hyped with really falsehoods that won't happen. You know, there's a lot of people and fans, they're not realistic to the business of boxing. I give you guys real content, accuracy. I don't have to rely on a bunch of clickbait or just rushing out content, low budget video and audio quality to make a point. People talking about PBC fighters, Stanionis and Barrios. I don't see those fights happening because Barrios could fight Pacquiao. Why not PBC do Barrios Stanionis? They're in-house fights, which are far easier to make, instead of giving Eddie Hearn and DAZN the look and say, hey, we want our champion to fight on your network and you get the viewership for the good fight. So we'll see what happens with Brian Norman, but time is definitely running out, like I said.